The journey downward begins in familiar waters, where sunlight penetrates easily and the surface world of waves and weather dominates every moment. But within the first 10 meters, something changes. Red wavelengths disappear entirely, absorbed by water molecules, making everything take on a bluish cast. By 20 meters, orange vanishes. Yellow follows quickly after. By 100 meters, the world exists in shades of blue and green alone, and the light intensity has dropped to just 10% of surface brightness. The transition accelerates. At 200 meters depth, only 1% of surface sunlight remains a perpetual twilight dim as dusk on land. This marks the boundary, the threshold into the largest habitat on planet Earth, the Midwater zone. Stretching from this twilight boundary down to approximately 1,000 meters, where the last photons finally surrender to darkness, the Midwater encompasses 3 billion cubic kilometers of liquid space. To grasp this volume, imagine every mountain range, every plain, every desert and forest on land, stacked together. The Midwater contains 50 times more living space. This realm extends across all ocean basins, wrapping around the entire planet wherever water runs deep enough. In the Pacific, it spans thousands of kilometers without interruption. In the Atlantic, it connects polar regions to the tropics. Even in smaller seas like the Mediterranean and Caribbean, wherever depth allows, the Midwater exists consistent, stable, eternal. Unlike the surface, where temperature swings with seasons and storms churn water into chaos, the Midwater maintains remarkable stability. Temperatures hover between 4 and 15 degrees Celsius year-round, varying little across centuries. The thermocline above acts as a density barrier, separating warm mixed surface waters from the deep cold, creating calm conditions that rarely experience the turbulence that dominates shallower depths. No crashing waves reach here. No violent currents disturb the peace. Pressure increases steadily and predictably, with depth 20 atmospheres at 200 meters, 100 atmospheres at 1,000 meters. But this gradient changes so gradually that it becomes just another constant, another predictable feature of a realm defined by consistency. The first humans to peer into this twilight world saw wonders that defied imagination. William Beebe, sealed inside a steel sphere barely wide enough to hold 2 people, descended on August 15, 1934, into waters off Bermuda. Connected to the surface ship by a single cable and a telephone line, he provided the first eyewitness account of the Midwater realm. At 600 meters, he reported seeing a real flash of brilliant phosphorescence and creatures that literally blazed at their own volition. At 765 meters, he encountered what he called a constellation of luminous bodies and jellyfish with lights arranged like windows in a skyscraper. When he reached 923 meters, a depth record that stood for 15 years, he gazed into darkness, punctuated by living lights, and realized that more luminous organisms existed in the twilight zone than in all other ocean depths combined. But Beebe's bathysphere, revolutionary as it was, could only observe. The thick glass windows limited views to narrow cones. The sphere itself, swaying on its cable, disturbed everything nearby. Nets brought up specimens, but crushed the delicate gelatinous creatures that proved to dominate this realm. The true nature of the Midwater remained hidden until submersibles arrived that could move freely, hover motionlessly, and capture organisms gently. When Bruce Robertson first piloted remotely operated vehicles into Monterey Canyon in the late 1980s, using blue lights that didn't startle the inhabitants and collection devices as gentle as a cupped hand, an entire ecosystem revealed itself. Fragile, jellies meters across pulsed through the water like ghostly bells. Transparent squid drifted past with only their eyes visible. Creatures that would have been destroyed by nets swam peacefully, unaware of the camera documenting their every movement. The most astonishing discovery came not from what researchers saw, but from what they heard. During World War II, sonar operators detected a mysterious layer in the ocean that scattered sound waves, appearing to rise toward the surface at dusk and sink at dawn. Initially suspected of being enemy submarines or equipment malfunctions, this deep scattering layer appeared in every ocean, moving in perfect synchronization with the Sunday. Only gradually did scientists realize they had detected the largest migration on Earth, trillions upon trillions of small fish, krill, squid, and other creatures ascending hundreds of meters each night to feed in productive surface waters, descending each day to the safety of darkness. More biomass moves vertically through the Midwater every 24 hours than all the wildebeest crossing the Serengeti, all the caribou migrating across Arctic tundra, all the birds flying between summer and winter ranges combined. This realm of perpetual twilight, where darkness never becomes absolute, but light never brightens past dim dusk, where temperatures remain constant through seasons and centuries, where the largest coordinated movement of animal life on Earth occurs twice daily, this is the Midwater. Not empty space between surface and bottom, but the most voluminous ecosystem on the planet, home to creatures found nowhere else, operating by rules that took hundreds of millions of years to evolve. As we descend deeper into understanding this realm, leaving behind the familiar surface world, the first lesson becomes clear. Everything we thought we knew about the ocean, everything we imagined about where life could thrive and how animals could survive, applies only to the thin skin of water, touching air and rock. The real ocean, the vast ocean, the ancient ocean, exists here in the in-between, suspended in liquid space, glowing with living light. 400 million years ago, during the Devonian period, nearly all ocean life clung to the bottom or swam near the surface. The vast three-dimensional space between remained largely empty, an unconquered frontier as daunting as the open air would later prove for terrestrial life. But evolutionary pressure never rests. On the seafloor, competition intensified for limited space and resources. At the surface, predators multiplied. Some organisms began experimenting with life in the middle, not touching bottom, not breaking surface, simply hovering in the liquid void. This transition required nothing less than reinventing the body from the ground up. The first and most fundamental challenge was buoyancy. In air, animals must generate enough lift to overcome gravity or accept falling to the ground. In water, organisms must match the density of the surrounding medium precisely, or fight constantly against sinking or rising. Early fish that ventured into midwater evolved swim bladders, gas-filled sacs that could be inflated or deflated to achieve neutral buoyancy. By adjusting the gas volume, these pioneers could hover effortlessly at any depth, expending no energy or maintaining vertical position. This innovation changed everything. A fish that doesn't need to swim constantly can survive on far less food. Energy saved from swimming can be invested in reproduction, growth, or simply waiting patiently for prey to drift within range. But swim bladders carry risks. Gas compresses under pressure. A bladder perfectly adjusted at 200 meters becomes too small at 400 meters, causing the fish to sink unless it secretes more gas. Rising reverses the problem. Gas expands, creating dangerous positive buoyancy that can send a fish rocketing toward the surface. Species that vertically migrate hundreds of meters daily evolved specialized glands that can secrete gas into the bladder against enormous pressure, gradients, and oval organs that can reabsorb gas almost instantly. The physiological machinery required for this countercurrent exchange systems, lactic acid production to release oxygen from hemoglobin, crystalline deposits that reflect gas back into the bladder, represent some of the most sophisticated biological engineering on Earth. Lanternfish, those champions of vertical migration, perfected this system 300 million years ago. Today, They travel 500 to 800 meters up and down every day, adjusting bladder volume continuously, spending energy equivalent to 20 to 30% of their body weight just on the journey. Other lineages solved buoyancy differently. Squid and cuttlefish, lacking swim bladders, filled their tissues with ammonium ions, lighter than seawater, and requiring no active regulation. The downside? Ammonia is toxic to most cellular processes, limiting how much tissue can be replaced by this buoyant solution. Glass squid achieve near-perfect transparency, partly because their muscles contain so much ammonia-rich fluid that they barely function. These animals drift more than swim, pulsing weakly through the water in slow motion. Sharks and rays never evolved swim bladders at all, instead developing massive oily livers. The lipids weigh less than water, providing lift, but never enough for neutral buoyancy. Midwater sharks must swim constantly or slowly sink, their streamlined bodies generating just enough lift to maintain depth. The most elegant solution came from the most unlikely source: creatures that abandoned complex body plans entirely. Jellyfish, salps, ctenophores, and other gelatinous organisms evolved bodies that are 95 to 99% water. Since their tissues match seawater's density almost exactly, they achieve neutral buoyancy without any specialized structures. The trade-off seems extreme: no bones, no shells, minimal muscles, barely any metabolism. But in the midwater's calm realm, these apparent weaknesses become strengths. A jellyfish doesn't need a heavy skeleton because no waves crash here, no predators bite through hard shells. Minimal metabolism means minimal food requirements. In a realm where food arrives sporadically and unpredictably, the ability to survive months without eating confers enormous advantage. This leads to the second great adaptation: transparency. On land, camouflage means matching the background bark patterns for moths on trees, white fur for hares in snow. But in midwater, there is no background, only blue-tinted water and light filtering from above. Any pigmented body casts a visible silhouette against the dim glow. The solution? Become invisible by eliminating anything that would absorb or scatter light. Hundreds of lineages independently evolve transparency: larval fish, squid, jellyfish, salps, larvaceans, crustaceans, even some octopi. Each face the same challenges. Red blood absorbs light, so blood cells become scarce, or hemoglobin gets concentrated in hidden areas. Muscles scatter light due to their regular structure, so midwater species develop minimal muscle mass, or arrange fibers in precise patterns that minimize scattering. Eyes must still collect light to see, creating a vulnerability many transparent species evolve: eyes that swivel downward when threatened, hiding the one non-transparent part of their body. The barrel-eye fish achieved perhaps the most remarkable solution. Its eyes are tubular, pointed permanently upward to watch for prey silhouetted against the faint surface light. But this creates a problem: how to see forward while looking up. The answer: the top of the fish's head is completely transparent, a window of clear tissue allowing the tubular eyes to swivel and look in any direction while remaining protected inside the skull. When scientists first brought barrel-eye specimens to the Speak, the surface in nets, the transparent dome collapsed, leading to decades of confusion about the fish's anatomy. Only when submersibles filmed living barrel eyes in their natural habitat did researchers realize the head was meant to be see-through, one of evolution's most elegant solutions to the problem of vision in the twilight realm. As the midwater community assembled over hundreds of millions of years, another pattern emerged: the dominance of patience over speed. In surface waters, predators rely on quick bursts, ambush tactics, and the element of surprise. In the midwater, these strategies fail. No rocks or reefs provide hiding places for ambush. No sudden currents assist escape. Everything happens in slow motion, visible from great distances to any creature with sufficiently large eyes. Natural selection favored predators that could wait hanging motionless, lights extinguished, metabolism reduced to barely ticking over, until prey drifted within reach. It favored prey that could survive on minimal nutrition, growing slowly but steadily, reproducing over years or decades rather than seasons. This slow-motion existence created an ecosystem fundamentally different from any other on Earth, where tropical reefs pulse with frantic energy, where intertidal zones demand split-second responses to crashing waves, the midwater simply drifts. Jellyfish live for years, pulsing gently through the blue void. Squid drift for months between meals. Even the fish, more active than their gelatinous neighbors, spend 90% of their time hovering motionlessly. The entire community operates on a metabolic budget so low that some organisms could survive a year on the energy contained in a single hamburger. In this realm of scarcity and patience, where food arrives sporadically and predators strike rarely, life discovered that doing less, moving less, wanting less, creates the path to persistence. In the dim blue twilight at 300 meters depth, a giant phantom jellyfish pulses slowly downward. Its bell measures more than a meter across. Its trailing oral arms extend 7 meters below ribbons of tissue longer than a giraffe is tall. The entire animal weighs barely more than the water it displaces, its body 99% water itself, with only a thin membrane giving it shape. Purple and red pigments color its bell colors that appear black in the blue light, making the massive creature nearly invisible despite its size. It moves with perfect economy, pulsing once every few seconds, each contraction propelling it gently downward. Small crustaceans become tangled in its trailing arms and are slowly transported toward the mouth. The jellyfish doesn't chase, doesn't hunt in any conventional sense. It simply drifts, arms spread like a living net, collecting whatever touches them. Nearby, thousands of lanternfish hang suspended in loose aggregation. Each fish is barely longer than a human finger, with disproportionately large eyes taking up much of its head. Along their sides and bellies, rows of photophores glow with cool blue-green light bioluminescent organs that will become essential in just a few hours. For now, in late afternoon surface time, the fish rest at 400 meters depth where the pressure reaches 40 atmospheres and the temperature holds steady at 6 degrees Celsius. They haven't eaten in 12 hours. Their stomachs are empty, their swim bladders perfectly adjusted to this depth. As the sun sets in the world above, a world they'll never see directly, but which governs their entire existence, something shifts in their biology. Light receptors detect the dimming. Hormones cascade through tiny bodies. Simultaneously, as if responding to a silent signal, the entire school begins rising. The ascent takes 45 minutes. The lanternfish maintain formation, thousands moving as one, adjusting their swim bladders continuously as pressure decreases. At 300 meters, where giant phantom jellyfish pulse downward on their own migration into deeper water, the fish are still ascending. At 200 meters, they cross the boundary into the euphotic zone where photosynthesis still occurs. At 100 meters, they begin to spread out, breaking formation to hunt individually. By the time they reach 50 meters, the sea around them teems with zooplankton copepods, krill, larval fish, tiny transparent organisms that fed all day on phytoplankton and now themselves become food. The feeding frenzy begins. Each lanternfish consumes its body weight in prey over the next 6 hours, gorging on the abundance concentrated in surface waters. Their stomachs distend. Their bodies convert prey into energy at remarkable efficiency, storing some for the long day ahead, burning some immediately to fuel continued hunting. Meanwhile, hundreds of meters below, the ecosystem they left behind transforms. Predatory fish that hunt by vision have lost their quarry. Gelatinous filter feeders spread out to occupy space temporarily vacated. The vertical structure of the entire ocean ecosystem shifts with the sun, twice every day, as reliable as tides. Among the most unusual midwater residents, vampire squid occupy their own category of strangeness. Despite the name, they don't feed on blood and aren't technically squid. These creatures evolved separately from both squid and octopi, representing a third branch of cephalopod evolution that persisted in the midwater while most relatives vanished. Their bodies are covered with a web of skin connecting their 8 arms, giving them the appearance of wearing a cape. When threatened, they don't flee. Escape is impossible in the slow-motion midwater world. Instead, they turn themselves inside out, pulling the webbed arms over their head, exposing the undersides which are covered with fleshy spines and photophores. The transformation makes them look twice their actual size and far more threatening. If the threat persists, they eject, not ink, but a cloud of bioluminescent particles that glow for up to 10 minutes, creating a sparkling decoy while the vampire squid drifts away in darkness. But the vampire squid's most remarkable feature is its diet. While most cephalopods are active predators, vampire squid have abandoned hunting entirely. They feed on marine snow, the constant rain of dead organisms, fecal pellets, and organic debris drifting downward from surface waters. Long filaments trail from their bodies, coated with sticky mucus that captures particles. Every few minutes, the squid reels in a filament, using small suckers to clean off the accumulated debris, then extends the filament again. This strategy allows survival at oxygen minimum zones, where concentrations drop to levels that suffocate most other animals. The vampire squid's metabolism runs so slowly, its oxygen requirements are so minimal, it thrives where other predators cannot follow. In the eternal twilight between 500 and 1,000 meters, where oxygen reaches its minimum and pressure approaches 100 atmospheres, vampire squid drift peacefully, harvesting the rain of organic matter, living lives that can span 8 years or more. Salps represent another extreme of the gelatinous lifestyle. These transparent, barrel-shaped creatures are actually tunicates, more closely related to vertebrates than to jellyfish despite their appearance. Water enters the front of a salp's body, passes through a mucus net that filters out particles as small as 1 micrometer, then exits the back. The contraction propels the salp forward, while simultaneously feeding it jet propulsion and filter feeding accomplished in a single elegant motion. Salps grow at astonishing rates for midwater creatures, sometimes doubling in size every 48 hours when food is abundant. They reproduce through a complex alternation of generations. Solitary individuals bud off chains of clones that can extend dozens of meters, creating structures resembling transparent strings of Christmas lights pulsing through the twilight. When salp blooms occur, triggered by abundant surface productivity, they can consume vast quantities of phytoplankton, clearing the water and repackaging tiny particles into large, dense fecal pellets that sink rapidly to the deep sea. A single large salp bloom can transport thousands of tons of carbon to the ocean floor in weeks, representing one of the fastest biological carbon transfer mechanisms in the ocean. After the feast, when nutrients decline and phytoplankton disappear, salp populations crash. Their bodies sink en masse, another pulse of organic matter feeding deep-sea communities. This boom and bust cycle, repeated across ocean basins, creates temporal variation in the otherwise stable midwater realm. Glass squid achieve transparency so complete they seem like windows into the water itself. Their muscles contain so much ammonia-rich fluid for buoyancy that they barely function, giving the squid's movements a dreamlike quality, limbs waving slowly, body drifting more than swimming. Internal organs remain visible through the transparent tissue, a tiny liver, a digestive system, eyes that swivel to track movement. The only opaque structures are the eyes themselves and a small cylindrical photophore between them. This light organ, packed with bioluminescent bacteria, can glow steadily or flash in patterns. Researchers suspect it serves for species recognition and mating displays, though the details remain mysterious. What is clear is that glass squid, like so many Midwater residents, have sacrificed almost everything for invisibility, mobility, strength, metabolic rate, and survived through 300 million years by becoming as close to nothing as a living creature can be. Among the largest residents, Humboldt squid bring a different energy to the twilight realm. Growing to 2 meters long and weighing up to 50 kilograms, these powerful predators hunt in coordinated groups, communicating through rapid color changes that wash across their bodies in waves. Red, white, red, white. The patterns flash in sequences that may represent a visual language, coordinating attacks on lanternfish schools and other prey. During the day, they rest at depths around 700 meters. At night, they ascend to pursue migrating prey, sometimes reaching within 20 meters of the surface. Unlike most midwater residents that drift passively or swim slowly, Humboldt squid explode into action when hunting, jets of water propelling them at speeds exceeding 25 kilometers per hour. Their tentacles shoot out to grab prey, the suckers lined with sharp teeth that prevent escape. Yet even these aggressive predators show the midwater's influence. They possess light organs on their ventral surface used for counter-illumination, adjusting the glow to match downwelling light and eliminate their shadow. They can control blood flow to different regions of their mantle, creating patterns visible to other squid but harder for predators to interpret. And like most midwater creatures, they tolerate remarkably low oxygen levels, surviving at concentrations that would suffocate most fish. In the vast oxygen minimum zones that extend across the eastern Pacific, Humboldt squid thrive where competitors cannot venture, dominating an ecological niche defined by physiological tolerance rather than superior hunting skill. Cookie-cutter sharks patrol the middle and upper midwater, rarely longer than 50 centimeters, but armed with disproportionately large teeth in a circular mouth. They attack whales, dolphins, tuna, marlins, anything large enough to provide a substantial meal by attaching with their suctorial lips, biting down with their teeth, and rotating their entire body. The result? A perfectly circular plug of flesh removed from the victim, who usually survives the encounter. Scars from cookie-cutter bites appear on marine mammals worldwide, marking this small shark's presence throughout tropical and temperate oceans. The shark itself glows photophores covering its belly, except for a dark collar around the throat. From below, this pattern resembles a small fish, attracting larger predators who approach to investigate and receive a nasty surprise. The collar, darker than surrounding tissue, may trigger the strike response in visual predators who see what appears to be a small prey item. Pyrosomes drift through the midwater, like living tubes of light colonial tunicates, where thousands of individuals fuse together to form a single structure. Small pyrosomes are thumb-sized. Large colonies reach 18 meters long and 1 meter in diameter, creating tubes wide enough to fit a human inside. Each individual zooid filters water, and the entire colony glows when disturbed, bioluminescent light rippling along the cylinder's length. Submersible pilots report encountering pyrosomes the size of school buses, drifting horizontally through the twilight, pulsing with blue-green luminescence. Like salps, pyrosomes sometimes bloom in response to productive surface conditions, their populations exploding until the water seems filled with transparent glowing tubes, then crashing when resources decline. In this community of drifters, pulsars, and patient predators, competition operates differently than in most ecosystems. With vast three-dimensional space available, and food arriving from above rather than being produced locally, organisms partition resources by depth, feeding strategy, and timing rather than through direct combat. Jellyfish strain particles at one size range, salps at another, larvaceans at a third. Some species feed day and night at constant depths. Others migrate to follow the sunday. Some hunt actively. Others simply wait. The result is an ecosystem of remarkable complexity and diversity, where thousands of species coexist in the same water column, each finding its niche in the gradient, between light and darkness, warmth and cold, abundance and scarcity. Every evening, as sunset spreads across the ocean surface, the largest coordinated movement of animal life on Earth begins. In the midwater zone, organisms that spent the day at depths of 400 to 800 meters start ascending. Lanternfish schools tighten their formation and begin rising. Krill adjust their swimming direction from horizontal to vertical. Squid change their buoyancy and drift upward. Jellyfish cease their downward pulse and begin contracting rhythmically toward the surface. The migration accelerates gradually, then reaches full speed, millions of tons of biomass moving upward at rates of 50 to 100 meters per hour. By full darkness, an hour or two after sunset, the transformation is complete. The midwater zone has partly emptied. The surface waters teem with life that wasn't present at noon. The numbers defy comprehension. Across all the world's oceans, approximately 10 billion tons of animals participate in this daily vertical migration. To visualize 10 billion tons, imagine 1,000 aircraft carriers stacked together, or every human on Earth along with all our domestic animals combined, or a single cube of living tissue 4 kilometers on each side. This entire mass moves hundreds of meters vertically twice every day, responding to the sun's position with precision that rivals the most sophisticated human navigation systems. What drives this stupendous migration? The answer lies in a simple calculation of risk versus reward. Surface waters receive direct sunlight, enabling phytoplankton to photosynthesize, creating the base of the food web. Zooplankton graze on phytoplankton during daylight hours, concentrating biomass near the surface. For a predator that eats zooplankton, the surface offers abundant food but also abundant danger. Visual predators hunt effectively in the lighted surface waters. Tuna, dolphins, seabirds and other hunters gorge on anything they can see. A small fish swimming at the surface during daytime stands excellent chance of being eaten within hours. The same fish at 400 meters depth, where light intensity is less than 0.1% of surface levels and most visual predators cannot follow, becomes nearly invisible. So the compromise? Hide in darkness during day, ascend to feed at night when visual predators lose their advantage. The strategy succeeds brilliantly. Lanternfish, which comprise perhaps 650 million tons of the world's fish biomass, more than all commercial fisheries combined, survive, primarily because they spend only a quarter of each day in dangerous surface waters. The rest of the time, they hover safely in the twilight where predators rarely venture. The energy cost of traveling 500 meters up and down every day is substantial, equivalent to 20 to 30% of body weight for many species. But this cost is smaller than the risk of remaining at the surface full time. Natural selection solved the equation millions of years ago. The migrants thrive. Species that remained at the surface face constant predation. Those that remained in the depths starve in the low productivity waters. The daily commuters inherit the ocean. The migration connects ocean zones that would otherwise remain isolated. Consider nitrogen, an essential element for all life. Phytoplankton, at the surface, absorb dissolved nitrogen compounds, converting inorganic nutrients into organic tissue through photosynthesis. Zooplankton eat the phytoplankton. Migrating lanternfish eat the zooplankton at night, then descend during day to digest. At depth, they excrete waste ammonia, urea, fecal pellets releasing nitrogen in forms that bacteria can convert back to nutrients. But this nitrogen is now at 400 meters depth, far below the sunlit zone where phytoplankton grow. Upwelling currents eventually return these nutrients to the surface, but the process takes months or years. The vertical migration creates a biological pump moving nutrients continuously. Every gram of nitrogen consumed at the surface and excreted at depth represents a tiny transfer downward. Multiplied across 10 billion tons of migrating animals feeding and excreting daily, the transfer becomes enormous. Estimates suggest the migration transports approximately 5 to 12 billion tons of carbon annually from surface waters to the deep ocean, comparable to the amount stored by all Earth's forests. This carbon, consumed as zooplankton at night and excreted as feces at depth, sinks further into the abyss, where it may remain for centuries or millennia. The process partially explains how oceans absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide. Phytoplankton converts CO2 into tissue. Zooplankton package this tissue into larger bodies. Migrants transport it hundreds of meters down, and sinking feces carry it to the deep sea where it enters slow geological cycles. The migration also transports energy. Lanternfish arriving at the surface with empty stomachs feed voraciously, consuming copepods, krill, larval fish, and any other prey they can catch. Each lanternfish might eat its entire body weight over 6 hours of feeding, a furious pace compared to their normal metabolism. But not all this food gets digested at the surface. As dawn approaches and the fish descend, their stomachs remain partly full. They continue digesting at depth, converting surface-produced energy into fish biomass in the midwater zone. This makes the fish themselves available to predators that hunt in the twilight. Larger fish, squid, marine mammals that dive deep during the day. Sperm whales, which hunt in darkness using echolocation, feed heavily on non-migrating squid and fish in the lower midwater zone. Many of these prey species depend on the energy raining down from above in the form of digesting migrants. The precision of the migration timing astonishes researchers. Lanternfish don't simply respond to darkness by ascending. They adjust their migration schedule based on moon phase, ascending later when a bright moon illuminates surface waters, extending their ascent earlier when clouds block moonlight. They avoid nights with bioluminescent dinoflagellate blooms at the surface, which would silhouette them against living light. They sense approaching storms through pressure changes and may delay migration if surface conditions seem dangerous. All these adjustments occur without any obvious communication between individuals, suggesting the timing mechanism operates through internal biological clocks synchronized with external cues. Essentially, the fish have evolved the ability to predict conditions at the surface while hovering hundreds of meters below, responding to environmental signals too subtle for human instruments to detect reliably. Not all midwater organisms migrate. Many species remain at constant depths throughout their lives, forming resident communities in different depth bands. These non-migrants rely on the food that drifts downward continuously: marine snow, fecal pellets, dead organisms, and the occasional carcass of something large that died at the surface. The rain of organic matter is constant but sparse. Resident midwater creatures survive by extreme metabolic efficiency. Some deep-sea fish species grow so slowly they don't reach reproductive maturity until age 15 or 20. Their tissues contain so little protein that they're barely edible. Evolution has stripped away everything non-essential, leaving organisms that are essentially just stomachs, reproductive organs, and the minimum machinery needed to keep cells functioning. Jellyfish present a different strategy. Many species don't actively migrate, but instead drift vertically with subtle changes in their pulsing rate. By pulsing slightly more frequently, a jellyfish rises slowly. By pausing between pulses, it sinks. This passive approach to vertical positioning allows jellyfish to adjust their depth over hours or days, following layers of prey concentration without the energy expenditure required for rapid migration. Some jellyfish species spend their entire adult lives drifting between 300 and 600 meters, rising slowly when prey densities increase above them, sinking when conditions below become more favorable. Their patient approach, moving perhaps 20 meters per day, represents the opposite extreme from lanternfish that travel 500 meters in an hour. The migration creates acoustic layers visible to sonar. Ships equipped with echo sounders detect dense reflections from midwater organisms, their swim bladders, bones, and bodies, reflecting sound waves back to the surface. During World War II, when submarine detection technology improved dramatically, sonar operators encountered mysterious layers that seemed to rise from the deep each evening and descend each morning. The layers appeared in every ocean at approximately the same depths worldwide, moving in perfect synchronization with sunset and sunrise. Military personnel initially suspected enemy submarines or equipment malfunctions. Some thought they'd discovered a previously unknown seafloor feature. The idea that biology could create such strong acoustic reflections seemed impossible. Surely no animal populations existed in sufficient density to scatter sound waves across entire ocean basins. Only after the war, when oceanographers gained access to military sonar data and began systematic surveys, did the truth emerge. The deep scattering layer consisted of fish, billions upon billions of small fish, primarily lanternfish, swimming together in loose aggregations dense enough to reflect sound like a false bottom. Follow-up surveys with nets confirmed that trawls made during the day at 400 meters captured enormous quantities of lanternfish, while the same depths at night yielded almost nothing. The fish hadn't disappeared. They'd risen to the surface. Subsequent research revealed that the deep scattering layer exists in all oceans, varies in intensity with latitude and season, and represents the largest concentration of fish biomass on Earth. The layer's discovery changed oceanography fundamentally, revealing that life in the ocean is not concentrated at the surface and bottom as previously assumed, but instead peaks in the midwater zone, specifically in the migrating community that commutes between darkness and twilight. The migration also influences climate patterns through multiple pathways. By transporting carbon to depth, the migration reduces atmospheric CO2 concentrations slightly, not enough to prevent climate change single-handedly, but significant enough to matter in global carbon budgets. Climate models that exclude the biological pump overestimate atmospheric CO2 by approximately 50 to 150 parts per million, a difference that would make Earth substantially warmer. The migration also affects ocean chemistry by redistributing oxygen. Migrating organisms consume oxygen at depth while digesting their food, reducing oxygen concentrations in the midwater zone. In some regions, particularly the eastern tropical Pacific and northern Indian Ocean, this biological oxygen consumption combines with poor water circulation to create oxygen minimum zones, layers of water where O2 concentrations drop below 5% of surface levels, low enough to suffocate most fish and invertebrates. Yet even in these extreme conditions, life persists. Specialized organisms with extraordinary oxygen tolerance dominate oxygen minimum zones. Vampire squid thrive here, their metabolism so efficient they need barely any oxygen. Certain jellyfish species concentrate in these layers, facing reduced predation because most fish cannot follow. Some lanternfish species migrate through oxygen minimum zones daily, holding their breath essentially during the transit, burning stored energy anaerobically until they reach better oxygenated waters above or below. The vertical structure of the ocean becomes a layer cake of conditions: warm, oxygenated, high light surface waters; cool, moderately oxygenated twilight zone; cold, oxygen-depleted minimum zone; and finally the deep sea, where oxygen levels rise again due to slow circulation of polar waters that sank near the poles, carrying dissolved oxygen from cold surface conditions. This layered structure creates boundaries that organisms must navigate. Thermoclines, oxyclines, and the light gradient all occur at slightly different depths depending on location and season. Migrating species must cross these boundaries twice daily, exposing themselves to temperature changes of 10 degrees Celsius or more, oxygen levels that vary by factors of 5 or 10, and light intensities that shift across 8 orders of magnitude. The physiological demands are extraordinary. Migrating lanternfish adjust their metabolic rate continuously, their gill ventilation rate responding to oxygen availability, their swim bladder volume changing with pressure, their eye sensitivity adapting to shifting light levels. That these tiny fish, most smaller than a human hand, accomplish this twice daily for years represents one of nature's most impressive endurance feats. The migration affects not just the migrants but every predator that depends on them. Tuna follow lanternfish schools to the surface at night, timing their own feeding to coincide with prey availability. Dolphins hunt migrating squid during the evening ascent, when prey are concentrated and moving predictably. Seabirds like shearwaters and petrels feed primarily at dawn and dusk, when prey species are transitioning between depths and vulnerable near the surface. Even whales time their dives to intersect with migrating prey, some species feeding primarily at night, when prey concentrations peak at accessible depths, others diving during day to reach non-migrants that remain at depth. The migration creates a temporal structure to the ocean, as fundamental as the spatial structure of coral reefs or kelp forests. Instead of locations where life concentrates, the migration creates times when certain depths burst with activity while others empty. At 500 meters depth, where sunlight has faded to less than 1/10,000th of surface intensity, a hatchetfish hovers motionlessly in the eternal twilight. Its body, compressed laterally until it's thin as a knife blade, nearly disappears when viewed head-on. But from below, the fish would be perfectly silhouetted against the faint glow filtering from above, a dark shape visible to any predator looking upward. This should be a death sentence. Yet the hatchetfish survives through one of nature's most sophisticated camouflage systems, counter-illumination. Along its belly, rows of photophores glow with precise blue-green light. Photoreceptors on the fish's back measure downwelling light intensity and spectrum continuously. A neural control system adjusts the ventral lights in real time, matching the brightness and color of light coming from above. The result: when a predator looks upward at the hatchetfish, it sees not a dark silhouette but a brightness matching the background perfectly. The fish effectively becomes invisible, not through transparency. Its body remains opaque, but by precisely cancelling the shadow it would otherwise cast. The system works so well that researchers studying hatchetfish behavior had difficulty seeing them even when cameras were positioned directly below the fish in laboratory settings. The counter-illumination was so precise, it fooled human observers viewing high-definition video. This represents just one application of bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms through chemical reactions. In the midwater zone, bioluminescence dominates. Surveys suggest that 76% of midwater organisms produce light compared to less than 10% of surface species, and perhaps 50% of deep-sea bottom dwellers. The midwater is quite literally the most luminous ecosystem on Earth, glowing with thousands of species creating light for dozens of different purposes. The chemistry underlying all this light is remarkably consistent. A substrate molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase, releasing energy as photons rather than heat. The reaction efficiency approaches 100% in many species. Essentially, all the chemical energy converts to light, with almost no waste heat. Human technologies have never achieved such efficient lighting. Our most advanced LEDs waste 15 to 20% of energy as heat. Bioluminescent organisms waste less than 1%. But the chemistry, while consistent in principle, varies enormously in detail. Different lineages evolved bioluminescence independently, at least 40 separate times, using different luciferin molecules, different luciferases, and different control mechanisms. Jellyfish use calcium ions to trigger their light production, the influx of calcium causing instant bioluminescent flashes. Squid and fish often culture symbiotic bacteria that produce light continuously, controlling the display by covering and uncovering the bacterial colonies with shutters of skin. Some organisms produce and store luciferin themselves. Others must obtain it from their diet, eating bioluminescent prey and sequestering the light-producing chemicals in their own photophores. The diversity of solutions all converge on the same result: cold light produced on demand, in colors optimized for maximum transmission through seawater. Blue and blue-green wavelengths dominate midwater bioluminescence because water absorbs other colors more readily. Red light penetrates barely 10 meters below the surface. Yellow and green travel slightly farther, but still fade within 50 meters. Blue light penetrates deepest, reaching faintly to depths below 600 meters. Natural selection, therefore, favored organisms that produced blue bioluminescence. Their signals traveled farthest and consumed the least energy to achieve visibility at distance. The convergence is so strong that nearly all midwater bioluminescence peaks at wavelengths between 470 and 490 nanometers, a narrow band of blue-green that exactly matches the color of residual sunlight. At these depths, this means counter-illumination works optimally. Organisms producing light at these wavelengths can match both the intensity and color of the background glow. The Atolla jellyfish evolved one of the most spectacular bioluminescent displays in the ocean: the burglar alarm. When a predator attacks, biting into the bell or grabbing a tentacle, the jellyfish begins flashing in brilliant blue pulses that ripple around the bell's margin like a spinning pinwheel of light. The display continues for minutes, visible from 50 meters away in the dark water. This seems counterproductive. Why attract attention when being eaten? The answer lies in the behavioral ecology of midwater predators. The jellyfish's attacker is likely small, perhaps a fish or squid hunting by touch or chemical cues in darkness, but larger predators hunting visually in the dim twilight watch for any light signals. The brilliant spinning display attracts these secondary predators, who investigate the commotion. Often, the original attacker finds itself suddenly pursued by something much larger and releases the jellyfish to flee. The burglar alarm sacrifices the energy required for the display and risks additional attention, but frequently saves the jellyfish's life by escalating the conflict. Dinoflagellate single-celled organisms that drift in vast numbers through surface and midwater zones produce some of the most common bioluminescence in the ocean. When disturbed by a breaking wave, a swimming fish, or a ship's propeller, they flash briefly, creating the blue-green sparkles often visible in tropical waters at night. In the midwater, these flashes serve as motion detectors. A fish swimming through dinoflagellate-rich water creates a trail of light bioluminescent sparkles marking its path for seconds after it passes. Visual predators can see these trails and follow them to locate prey. The dinoflagellates gain nothing directly from this light production, but the system evolved because dinoflagellates in the vicinity of a disturbance likely face danger, perhaps from a grazing copepod or other zooplankton. By flashing, they create light that may attract predators to eat the grazer, indirectly protecting other dinoflagellates nearby. The strategy works well enough that bioluminescent dinoflagellates dominate many midwater regions, creating what amounts to a living motion detection system that betrays any creature trying to swim stealthily. Firefly squid gather in enormous aggregations off the coast of Japan, creating one of the most spectacular bioluminescent displays in the world. Each squid, barely longer than a human thumb, possesses thousands of tiny photophores covering its body. During mating season, males create intricate light shows, patterns of flashing, pulsing, and steady glows in different colors and intensities. The displays serve as species recognition signals and potentially as indicators of male quality, though researchers still debate the details. What's clear is that the light shows create underwater fireworks visible from boats at the surface, as millions of squid flash simultaneously in the darkness. The squid also use counter-illumination while hunting, their ventral photophores matching downwelling light to eliminate their shadows. When threatened, they can produce luminous ink, ejecting not the dark ink typical of most squid, but a glowing cloud that hangs in the water for minutes, creating a bright decoy while the squid jets away into darkness. The anglerfish, technically multiple families of deep-sea fish that evolved similar strategies, independently carries bioluminescence to its logical extreme. A modified dorsal fin spine extends forward over the fish's mouth, tipped with a lure containing bioluminescent bacteria. The bacteria glow continuously, creating a point of light in the darkness. Other fish, attracted to the glow, approach to investigate. When prey comes within range, the anglerfish strikes in milliseconds, its enormous jaws engulfing the victim whole. The anglerfish doesn't actively hunt or pursue prey. It simply sits motionless, sometimes for days or weeks, waiting for curiosity to bring food directly to its mouth. The bacteria, meanwhile, receive nutrients from the anglerfish's bloodstream and a protected environment with optimal conditions for growth. The relationship represents a perfect symbiosis. Bacteria get food and shelter. The anglerfish gets a biological lure that requires no energy input beyond maintaining the bacterial culture. Some predators evolved the opposite strategy, using bioluminescence to illuminate prey rather than lure them. The stoplight loosejaw fish possesses photophores beneath its eyes that produce red light, extremely unusual in the deep sea, where most organisms are blind to red wavelengths. The fish essentially has biological headlights that it alone can see, allowing it to illuminate prey while remaining invisible. Its eyes contain special pigments that detect red light, unlike most midwater organisms whose vision is tuned exclusively to blue. The stoplight loosejaw hunts by swimming slowly through the twilight zone, red lights glowing, watching for the reflection of red light from prey bodies. To the prey, completely blind to red wavelengths, the predator remains invisible in darkness. To the stoplight loosejaw, the prey appears clearly against the black background, illuminated by light they cannot detect. Viperfish take a different approach, using their bioluminescence to create camouflage while hunting. Long, needle-like teeth protrude from their jaws, teeth so large the fish cannot fully close its mouth. Photophores along its body provide counter-illumination, while additional photophores inside its mouth glow faintly. When the mouth opens to strike, these internal lights remain on, preventing the mouth cavity from appearing as a sudden dark void that might startle prey at the last moment. The viperfish strikes with remarkable speed despite its size, the enormous teeth impaling prey before it can react. Like many midwater predators, viperfish can survive months between meals, their metabolism slowing to barely sustainable levels, all energy reserved for the brief explosive moment of attack. The cookie-cutter shark's bioluminescence serves multiple purposes simultaneously. Photophores cover its entire ventral surface except for a dark collar around the throat. From below, the glowing belly makes the shark nearly invisible through counter-illumination, but the dark collar remains visible, looking like a small fish or squid. Larger predators see the collar, mistake it for prey, and approach to investigate. When they come within range, the cookie cutter strikes, removing its characteristic circular plug of flesh. The predator, wounded but not killed, flees. The shark consumes its meal and returns to hunting, its bioluminescence serving both as camouflage and lure in a single elegant adaptation. Perhaps the most unexpected use of bioluminescence comes from ostracods, tiny crustaceans barely visible to the naked eye. Males of certain species produce clouds of bioluminescent chemicals that they squirt into the water in precisely timed sequences. Each species creates a unique pattern, pulses separated by specific intervals, rising trajectories with particular shapes, colors with distinct spectra. Females watch from below, identifying males of their own species by the light patterns. When a female sees an attractive display, she swims up to meet the male. The entire courtship ritual occurs through light signals in the darkness, with no physical contact until the final moment. The patterns are so species-specific that researchers can identify ostracod species simply by photographing their light displays, never seeing the animals themselves. Siphonophores, colonial organisms related to jellyfish, where multiple specialized polyps work together as a single predatory unit, create some of the most sophisticated bioluminescent structures in the ocean. The Portuguese man-o'-war is the most famous siphonophore, but its relatives in the midwater zone achieve far greater complexity. Some species create tentacles extending 40 meters or more, lined with stinging cells and bioluminescent lures. The colony drifts passively, tentacles spread in a vast living net, each lure glowing softly to attract small fish and crustaceans. When prey touches the tentacles, stinging cells fire, injecting toxins that paralyze the victim instantly. Other polyps then reel in the tentacles, pulling prey up to feeding polyps that digest it. The entire colony shares the nutrients, with specialized polyps handling reproduction, flotation, feeding, and defense. The bioluminescence serves as the primary hunting tool, transforming the colony into a web of living light that captures anything drawn to the glow. For most of human history, the midwater remained absolutely unknown. Ancient mariners knew surface waters intimately: currents, waves, seasonal changes, the behavior of fish and marine mammals. Coastal peoples understood tide pools and shallow reefs, but the vast realm between surface and seafloor existed beyond perception, a liquid void that humans could never visit and barely imagined. The first hints came not from observation, but from absence. Fishermen noticed that nets set at mid-depths caught almost nothing, while nets dragged along the bottom or suspended near the surface filled with fish. The conclusion seemed obvious. Open water contained no life. The ocean was empty space, with life concentrated only where sunlight reached or where the bottom provided substrate for attachment. This assumption persisted into the 19th century. The scientific consensus held that no life could exist below a few hundred meters depth. Pressure would be too extreme, darkness too complete, food too scarce. The ocean below this hypothetical azoic zone must be sterile, lifeless, a liquid desert extending to the deepest trenches. The HMS Challenger expedition from 1872 to 1876 demolished this belief decisively. The ship, equipped with newly developed deep-water sampling equipment, collected organisms from depths exceeding 8,000 meters. The dredges brought up animals from every depth sampled. The ocean was not empty. Life persisted to the greatest depths the expedition could reach. But the Challenger's sampling gear had serious limitations. Heavy dredges and trawls destroyed delicate organisms. Nets pulled vertically through the water column, mixed specimens from multiple depths. Transparent gelatinous creatures arrived at the surface as unrecognizable blobs of tissue. The true nature of midwater life remained hidden until observation became possible. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely inventor, Charles William Beebe, curator of ornithology at the Bronx Zoo, who became obsessed with exploring the ocean after years of studying terrestrial birds. In the 1920s, Beebe partnered with engineer Otis Barton to create the bathysphere, a steel ball barely 5 feet in diameter with 3-inch thick quartz windows. A single steel cable connected the bathysphere to a surface ship. A telephone line allowed communication. Oxygen cylinders and chemical scrubbers inside maintained breathable air for 2 people for several hours. The device was primitive, claustrophobic, and extraordinarily dangerous. If the cable broke, the bathysphere would plummet to the seafloor with no possibility of recovery. If water leaked through the windows or door seal, the occupants would die within seconds. Yet Beebe dove repeatedly, driven by insatiable curiosity about what existed in the depths. On June 11, 1930, Beebe and Barton descended to 435 meters off Bermuda, deeper than any human had ever gone in the ocean. Beebe's account, broadcast live over radio and published in National Geographic, described a world that seemed alien. The sun no longer played the leading role in my consciousness. We were suspended in a shaft of light in what seemed sheer night. I saw strange beings which had never been seen by men. At 600 meters, fish appeared that glowed with their own light, rows of photophores like portholes on an ocean liner. Jellyfish pulsed past, trailing luminous tentacles. Deeper still, at 800 meters, Bibi reported seeing something immense that passed beyond the window's range of illumination, its size impossible to determine. Whether hallucination or genuine observation of a giant squid or whale shark, Bibi's account captivated audiences worldwide. The Midwater was not empty. It teemed with creatures adapted to conditions humans found unimaginable. Bibi's final dive on August 15, 1934, reached 923 meters, a depth record that stood until the 1940s. His descriptions changed oceanography permanently, transforming the Midwater from abstraction to place, from hypothesis to observed reality. But the bathysphere provided only glimpses, narrow views through small windows, observations limited to whatever happened to swim within range of the lights. Systematic study required better tools. World War II accelerated their development. Sonar, initially designed to detect submarines, revealed the deep scattering layer, dense concentrations of organisms that scattered sound waves. After the war, oceanographers began using military sonar equipment for scientific surveys, mapping the vertical distribution of marine life across entire ocean basins. The patterns astonished everyone. In every ocean surveyed, from tropical to polar regions, strong acoustic returns appeared at depths between 300 and 600 meters during daylight hours. At sunset, the layer rose toward the surface. At dawn, it descended again. The consistency across all oceans and the perfect synchronization with sunrise and sunset suggested a biological phenomenon of unprecedented scale. Early attempts to capture organisms from the scattering layer used modified trawl nets pulled through the water at target depths. The nets returned with catches dominated by lanternfish, small fish barely 10 centimeters long, with enormous eyes and rows of photophores. That such tiny fish could create acoustic returns visible to shipboard sonar seemed impossible. Yet the numbers told the story. When researchers calculated the density of lanternfish required to produce the observed acoustic scattering, they arrived at biomass estimates exceeding all previous predictions by factors of 10 or 100. The Midwater wasn't just inhabited, it contained the largest animal populations on Earth. But sonar and nets still couldn't reveal how these creatures actually behaved. Nets destroyed fragile jellies and frightened fish into unnatural aggregations. Sonar detected density changes, but couldn't identify species or observe behavior. The next breakthrough came from submersibles, small submarines that could descend to midwater depths, hover motionlessly, and allow researchers to observe organisms in their natural habitat. The first generation of research submersibles appeared in the 1960s. Alvin, built in 1964, could reach depths of 3,000 meters carrying 3 people. The submersible initially focused on geological research, mapping the mid-ocean ridge, exploring hydrothermal vents, but biologists quickly realized its potential for studying midwater communities. Sylvia Earle's solo dive in 1979 demonstrated what one person could observe. Earle descended in a special atmospheric diving suit to 396 meters in Hawaiian waters, setting a record for solo diving that still stands. Her observations, recorded on film and in detailed notes, revealed creatures that nets had never captured, delicate jellies meters across, with tentacles extending into the darkness, transparent squid that became visible only when light reflected from their internal structures, and what she described as a galaxy of living lights produced by bioluminescent organisms disturbed by her movements. Earle's accounts, like Bibi's decades earlier, brought the midwater into public consciousness, transforming it from scientific abstraction to place of wonder. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, founded in 1987, revolutionized midwater research by developing new observation and collection tools specifically designed for fragile organisms. Bruce Robertson pioneered the use of remotely operated vehicles equipped with blue lights that don't disturb creatures adapted to the dim blue twilight. Red lights, which previous researchers used because they provided better illumination, startle and frighten most midwater animals, causing them to flee or behave unnaturally. Blue lights allow observation of normal behavior. The Institute also developed gentle collection systems, soft rubber devices that enclose organisms without damaging them, then transfer them into specialized containers maintaining appropriate temperature and pressure. For the first time, researchers could bring delicate jellies and transparent squid to the surface, intact and alive, allowing studies of physiology and behavior impossible with preserved specimens. Perhaps the most revolutionary development came from cameras designed to operate autonomously at depth. Edith Widder, a bioluminescence expert, created the Eye in the Sea, a camera system with red lights invisible to most deep-sea organisms, and an electronic jellyfish that produces bioluminescent displays, mimicking a trawler's burglar alarm. Deployed at depth and left unattended for days or weeks, the system attracts predators, investigating the fake alarm while recording their behavior with cameras they cannot see. In 2012, Widder's system captured the first footage of a giant squid in its natural habitat at 630 meters depth in Japanese waters. The squid, approximately 3 meters long with eyes the size of dinner plates, approached the electronic jellyfish, examined it with its tentacles, then disappeared into darkness. The footage confirmed what researchers had suspected. Giant squid inhabit the midwater zone, hunt by vision, using their enormous eyes to detect bioluminescent flashes, and grow to sizes exceeding most previous estimates. Environmental DNA analysis identifying species from genetic material dissolved in seawater revealed biodiversity far exceeding what nets and cameras had documented. Researchers collect water samples at various depths, filter out organisms and tissue fragments, then sequence all the DNA present. Each unique genetic sequence potentially represents a different species. Results from midwater eDNA surveys suggest that thousands of species remain undiscovered, particularly among small gelatinous organisms, larval forms, and rare deep-dwelling fish. Some regions show genetic signatures that match no known organisms, suggesting entire families or orders of animals that science hasn't yet encountered directly. The midwater's biodiversity may rival tropical rainforests, with the critical difference that rainforest species are at least visible and accessible for study, while midwater organisms remain largely unknown even after decades of calm. Intensive research. Acoustic tags attached to larger animals revealed migration patterns and diving behavior at unprecedented resolution. Tags affixed to sperm whales record depth, temperature, and acceleration every second, then transmit data to satellites when the whale surfaces. The resulting records show that sperm whales dive routinely to 1,000 to 1,200 meters, spending 45 minutes at depth, hunting primarily in the lower midwater and upper bathypelagic zones. They consume primarily squid, with individual whales eating several hundred kilograms daily. Tags on tuna and billfish reveal similar patterns. Repeated dives to midwater depths during daylight hours, pursuing prey into the twilight zone, then returning to warmer surface waters to recover from the temperature stress of diving into water 10 degrees colder than their body temperature. Satellite oceanography added a global perspective. Sensors measuring ocean color detect phytoplankton concentrations at the surface, creating maps of primary productivity. When combined with acoustic surveys and modeling, these data reveal how surface productivity affects midwater communities. In regions where upwelling brings nutrients to the surface, phytoplankton blooms feed zooplankton populations that explode in density. Within weeks, midwater predator populations increase as they follow prey concentrations. The connections operate across thousands of kilometers, with surface blooms in one region affecting midwater communities hundreds of miles distant as migrants follow food sources. The ocean operates as an integrated system, with the midwater serving as a connective layer linking surface and deep-sea ecosystems. Climate models incorporated the biological pump only recently, as oceanographers recognized the midwater's role in carbon cycling. The realization that vertical migration transports billions of tons of carbon annually from the atmosphere to deep ocean storage changed predictions about future climate change. Models that excluded this process underestimated ocean carbon uptake by 30 to 50%. Including the biological pump improved model accuracy substantially, while also highlighting the risks if climate change disrupts migration patterns. Warming surface waters, expanding oxygen minimum zones, and acidification all threaten the organisms that drive carbon transport. If migration decreases in future decades, atmospheric CO2 concentrations would rise faster than current predictions, suggest a feedback loop where climate change weakens the natural system that helps regulate climate. 3 billion cubic kilometers of water hang suspended between surface and abyss, maintaining conditions that have varied little since the age of dinosaurs. While ice ages came and went on land, while sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of meters, the midwater remained stable, cool, dim, calm, eternal. Temperature changes that extinguish species in coastal zones barely registered here, delayed by decades or centuries as surface water slowly mixed downward. Light levels remained constant regardless of what happened in the atmosphere above. Pressure never varied except over timescales of plate tectonics as ocean basins slowly deepened or shallowed. This extraordinary stability allowed ancient lineages to persist, provided refuge for species displaced from more variable environments, and created the conditions for extreme specialization impossible in habitats subject to rapid change. Consider the chambered nautilus, essentially unchanged for 500 million years, still thriving in midwater zones around coral reefs in the Indo-Pacific. Its external shell, divided into gas-filled chambers providing buoyancy, represents technology that evolved before fish, before jaws, before eyes capable of focusing images. On land and in coastal shallows, nautiloids vanished during mass extinctions, outcompeted by more modern animals. But in the stable, midwater, they persisted, filling a niche that never disappeared. The same pattern repeats throughout midwater communities: ancient body plans, conservative adaptations, slow evolutionary rates compared to surface species. When your environment changes on timescales of millions of years rather than seasons, natural selection favors persistence over innovation. This stability makes the midwater seem immune to human impacts. Industrial fishing altered coastal ecosystems dramatically starting in the 1800s. Bottom trawling destroyed seafloor habitats across continental shelves. Coral reefs suffered bleaching events, pollution, and overfishing. But midwater communities remained largely untouched. The zone's depth protected it from most fishing gear. Its vast volume diluted pollutants to concentrations that seemed insignificant. Climate change warmed surface waters dramatically, but the thermocline buffered the midwater from rapid temperature shifts. For most of the 20th century, scientists treated the midwater as an ecosystem beyond human reach, a wilderness that would remain pristine simply by virtue of its inaccessibility. That assumption is crumbling. The first threat comes from expanding fisheries. As coastal fish stocks collapsed, fishing fleets moved offshore and deeper. Lanternfish, comprising 650 million tons of biomass, represent the largest unexploited fish stock on Earth. Several nations have explored commercial lanternfish harvesting, arguing that taking even 10% of the population annually would still leave 585 million tons, far more than exists of any other fish species. Proponents suggest lanternfish could provide protein for growing human populations, fish meal for aquaculture, and economic opportunities for fishing communities facing declining catches elsewhere. But harvesting lanternfish would have consequences extending far beyond the target species. These fish are the primary prey for tuna, billfish, many sharks, dolphins, whales, and seabirds. They drive the biological pump, transporting billions of tons of carbon annually to depth. Removing even a small fraction might destabilize the entire midwater ecosystem in ways impossible to predict. Climate change reaches the midwater through multiple pathways. Warming surface waters increase the strength of the thermocline, the density barrier separating warm surface from cool deep water. A stronger thermocline reduces mixing between layers, which sounds neutral but has serious consequences. Nutrients that would normally reach the surface through slow upwelling remain trapped at depth. Surface productivity declines. With less phytoplankton, zooplankton populations shrink. Migrating fish find less food at the surface during their nightly ascent, reducing the energy available for reproduction and growth. Populations decline gradually, taking decades to show clear trends, but ultimately shifting the ecosystem toward lower productivity. Models predict that primary productivity in some ocean regions could decline by 20 to 30% by 2100 under high-emission scenarios, with cascading effects throughout the midwater food web. Oxygen minimum zones are expanding as oceans warm. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cold water, basic physics that has profound biological consequences. As surface waters warm, they hold less oxygen, even when fully equilibrated with the atmosphere. This slightly lower oxygen content then mixes downward, reducing concentrations throughout the water column. Simultaneously, increased stratification reduces the rate at which oxygen reaches depth, since less mixing occurs across the strengthened thermocline. The combination causes oxygen minimum zones to expand horizontally and vertically, compressing the habitable midwater zone for species that cannot tolerate low oxygen levels. Organisms adapted to high oxygen must either migrate to higher latitudes where waters remain cold and oxygenated, or move deeper or shallower, compressing their depth range. Species specialized for narrow depth bands find themselves squeezed between unsuitable conditions above and below, with nowhere to go. Ocean acidification affects even midwater organisms far below the surface. As atmospheric CO2 increases, the ocean absorbs approximately 30% of human emissions, converting CO2 into carbonic acid that lowers seawater pH. The surface ocean has acidified by approximately 0.1 pH units since pre-industrial times, with another 0.2 to 0.3 unit decrease projected by 2100. This may sound small, but pH is a logarithmic scale. Each 0.1 unit decrease represents 25% more hydrogen ions in seawater. For organisms that build calcium carbonate structures, shells, statoliths, teeth, skeletons, acidification makes construction more difficult, requiring extra energy to precipitate minerals against less favorable chemical conditions. Many zooplankton species have calcium carbonate shells or statoliths used for balance. As these become harder to build and maintain, zooplankton populations may decline, reducing food for midwater predators and weakening the biological pump that depends on sinking calcium carbonate to transport carbon to depth. Microplastics are drifting downward through the water column in concentrations that increase yearly. Particles of degraded plastic float throughout surface waters, then slowly sink as they become colonized by microorganisms that add weight. As they descend, zooplankton mistake them for food particles, ingesting plastic that cannot be digested and cannot provide nutrition, but fills their stomachs and may release toxic chemicals into their tissues. Filter feeders like salps and larvaceans capture microplastics in their feeding structures along with genuine food. Predators consume prey containing plastic particles, bioaccumulating contamination up the food web. The full consequences remain uncertain, but early studies suggest that organisms containing significant plastic burden show reduced reproductive success and slower growth rates compared to uncontaminated individuals. If these effects scale to entire populations, microplastic contamination could reduce midwater ecosystem productivity even without killing organisms directly. Despite these mounting threats, the midwater retains inherent advantages that coastal and surface ecosystems lack. Its sheer volume provides buffer against localized disturbances. A pollution event that devastates a coral reef affects a few square kilometers. The same pollutant concentration in the midwater affects millions of cubic kilometers, but dilutes to lower concentrations. The midwater's separation from the surface and seafloor limits human physical impacts. No bottom trawling, no dredging, no construction projects, no direct habitat destruction. Most human activities occur at interfaces: land, sea, sea-air, or on the seafloor. The midwater exists removed from all these interfaces, accessible only with significant technological effort. This inaccessibility, which frustrated researchers for centuries, now serves as protection. The midwater also demonstrates remarkable resilience through redundancy. Multiple species fill similar ecological roles at slightly different depths, temperatures, or oxygen levels. If one species declines, others expand their range to fill the vacant niche. This functional redundancy means the ecosystem can continue operating even when individual species shift or decline. Lanternfish comprise dozens of species, each with slightly different depth preferences, migration patterns, and temperature tolerances. If warming eliminates one species from a region, others move in from adjacent areas. The vertical migration continues, the biological pump keeps functioning, predators find alternative prey. The system maintains its fundamental structure, even as species composition changes. Long generation times in some midwater species create vulnerability to overharvesting, but provide advantages for surviving other disturbances. A fish that takes 5 years to mature cannot quickly rebound from heavy fishing pressure. Remove too many individuals, and the population requires decades to recover. But this same slow reproduction means the species evolved conservative strategies, producing offspring over many years rather than betting everything on a single spawning event. Populations can weather several bad years when conditions reduce survival, because adults keep producing offspring over long lifespans. Climate variations that occur over decades allow gradual adaptation, with selection acting over many generations to favor individuals tolerant of changing conditions. The vastness of the midwater also means vast populations. 650 million tons of lanternfish translates to perhaps 10 trillion individual fish. Even if climate change reduces this population by 10%, a catastrophic decline by conservation standards, 600 million tons remain, still the largest fish biomass on Earth. Compare this to coastal species, where entire populations might number hundreds of thousands or a few million individuals. Small populations face extinction from single catastrophic events. Large populations can absorb substantial losses and persist. The midwater's enormous populations provide insurance against extinction, even under scenarios where populations decline significantly. Protected areas are expanding to include the midwater for the first time. Historically, marine protected areas focused on coastal zones, coral reefs, seagrass beds, kelp forests, breeding grounds for commercial fish species. The midwater received no protection because it received no attention. But recent international agreements recognize the deep ocean as requiring conservation. The high seas ocean areas beyond the nation's territorial waters cover 64% of ocean surface and contain the vast majority of midwater habitat. New treaties are establishing protected areas that extend from surface to seafloor, prohibiting fishing and mineral extraction in regions identified as particularly important for biodiversity or ecosystem function. The process moves slowly, with negotiations among nations taking years, but progress continues. Protected areas covering millions of square kilometers now include midwater zones, particularly around seamounts where migrating organisms concentrate, and in regions where ocean currents create productivity hotspots. Asterisk. Scientific research is expanding rapidly as technology improves and costs decrease. Remotely operated vehicles that cost millions of dollars in the 1980s now cost hundreds of thousands. Autonomous underwater vehicles can survey vast areas without requiring a ship to remain on station, dramatically reducing operational costs. Environmental DNA analysis allows biodiversity assessment from water samples collected by automated systems. Satellite tags transmit animal movement data globally. Each technological advance makes midwater research more feasible, attracting more scientists, generating more data, and improving understanding of how the ecosystem functions and what it needs to persist. This growing knowledge creates opportunities for effective conservation. Early conservation efforts failed partly from ignorance, protecting areas without knowing what needed protection, implementing rules without understanding their consequences. Modern conservation operates from stronger scientific foundation. We know that lanternfish populations are enormous but potentially vulnerable to overfishing. We know that vertical migration drives the biological pump and carbon sequestration. We know that oxygen minimum zones are expanding, and some species cannot adapt quickly. This knowledge allows targeted conservation, protecting critical migration routes, limiting fishing in areas where target species serve essential ecosystem roles, monitoring oxygen levels, and establishing early warning systems for dangerous changes, studying genetic diversity to identify populations most likely to adapt to changing conditions. The midwater's remoteness also means most people never see it, creating conservation challenges. Humans protect what we love, and we love what we know. Coral reefs attract millions of snorkelers and divers who become advocates for protection. Whales, dolphins, and sea turtles inspire passionate conservation movements. But jellyfish drifting at 500 meters depth, lanternfish migrating through eternal twilight, transparent squid pulsing through darkness. These organisms remain abstractions to most people, known only through documentary footage and scientific descriptions. Building public support for midwater conservation requires translating scientific knowledge into emotional connection, helping people understand that these strange creatures in a realm they'll never visit personally are nonetheless vital to the ocean systems that produce half of Earth's oxygen and regulate the climate that determines where humans can live. Yet the midwater's greatest protection may be simply its persistence. 3 billion cubic kilometers of water, stable temperature, consistent conditions, and populations numbering in the trillions. This is not a fragile ecosystem on the edge of collapse. It is robust, ancient, resilient. Climate change affects it, but slowly. Pollution reaches it, but diluted. Fishing pressure threatens it, but hasn't yet reached it at scale. The midwater has weathered mass extinctions, survived ice ages, persisted through events that extinguished coastal ecosystems. Its residents evolved over hundreds of millions of years to thrive in this realm. They possess genetic adaptations refined through endless generations, physiological tolerances, allowing survival across wide ranges of conditions, reproductive strategies ensuring population persistence through variable times. As night falls across the Pacific, lanternfish begin their ascent from 400 meters depth. The school contains perhaps 10 million individuals, moving together in loose formation, each fish adjusting its swim bladder as pressure decreases. They've made this journey every night of their lives, some for 1 year, some for 5, some for longer. Their ancestors made this journey for 300 million years before them. Their descendants will make it for millions of years hence, assuming humans allow them to persist. The migration creates a living current, a river of biomass flowing upward through the twilight, connecting surface and depth, moving carbon and nutrients, feeding predators above and below, maintaining the cycles that keep the ocean functioning. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Behind them, below them, the midwater remains. Giant phantom jellyfish pulse slowly downward. Vampire squid drift through oxygen minimum zones. Salps filter microscopic particles. Glass squid hover nearly invisible in the blue twilight. Pyrosomes glow when disturbed. Hatchetfish illuminate their bellies to match the fading light from above. Each organism, pursuing its ancient strategy, filling its niche, contributing to the whole. The ecosystem operates as it has for eons, slowly, patiently, efficiently. No urgency, no panic, no desperation. Just life continuing in the largest habitat on Earth, in the calm between surface chaos and abyssal cold, in the perpetual twilight where darkness never becomes complete and light never brightens past dusk. This is the Midwater, the realm we've barely begun to understand, the ecosystem containing more life than all coastal zones combined, the biological pump regulating Earth's climate, the last great wilderness in the ocean, vast enough to swallow all human works without a trace, deep enough to remain beyond our daily awareness, important enough that its fate and ours are inseparably linked. As we drift toward sleep, as consciousness fades and thoughts slow, we can imagine joining these creatures in their calm realm, floating weightless in liquid space, glowing with living light, moving to rhythms set by the sun and moon, participating in cycles that predate humanity and will likely outlast us. The Midwater drifts on, carrying its strange and beautiful cargo, maintaining the systems that make oceans and therefore Earth itself hospitable to life.